To be or not to be a poet. A person that is jumbling words together to convey a particular emotion, situation, or event. Something extraordinary or devastating might have happened, and thou must paint sounds from their mouth onto a piece of paper. To be a poet is to be an artist of scripture. They are preaching their perspectives to acquire attention and acknowledgement. A selfish pursuit within a greedy occupational type, that occupation being art itself. To master this lonesome journey of inscribing one's own experiences, you will need to know the basics. I will teach you those basics. The elements to actually create a poem and the concepts which to creatively guide you through this misty fog of creativity. There is something about poets and artists in general I respect. That is the ability to recognize their ending title, their last page, their last responsibility to be provisions for the worms. You see, they see life as something to almost seize. They can hear the whispers of the departed beckoning out to them, prompting them to seize the day. Correct. To define poetry is to prescribe something that can be ever-changing. To keep the subject contained, we will say it is a type of writing where, through meaning, sound, and rhythm, you convey a specific idea and feeling. To successfully do this, you must use these 4 things to enhance your poem and give it some credibility. These 4 things are imagery, sound devices, figurative language, and form. Once I've taught you these things, we will then define some of the poem's basic building blocks. These things being line and stanza break. Let us begin. The senses on the human body are quite fascinating. Smelling, touching, sight, hearing, and tasting are all magnificent. To capture these in your poem is to capture a fantastic imagery. It would help if you used these things to bind your audience into a crushing hold, making them feel the cold, clammy breath caressing the back of their neck as they sit in the sour, pungent air of a cramped, dark room. Make them ingest the stale, sharp words you put into their minds. You can use imagery in many creative ways. Just use it wisely to really hold your audience's attention. You aren't going to use an actual device to make sound when using sound devices for your poem. That would be cheating. We're going to be using words, so you must convey sound through words. To use a sound device is to use words themselves to create a sound or representation of sound. Rhyming and onomatopoeias are a few basics, but a specific term like meter using sound patterns in a poem is an excellent use of a sound device. Here's a little poem I made myself. It hissed at me like a rat. Standing, it crushed a head. Splat. I watched it stand with a grin. I covered in blood and fat. Knowing I couldn't run from that, I knew defeat and caved in. You see, I was able to use all 3, and it worked out quite nicely. Figurative language. Metaphors, similes, personifications, hyperboles, and symbolism are prime examples of figurative language. The next concept needed to make a great poem, really. Figurative language is the color to the paint, the true meaning behind a saying or an inside joke. A truth wrapped in a beautiful, crisp lie. Using a word or phrase and altering the original meaning behind it. For example, I could eat a horse right now. I am so hungry. Hyperbolism. The hills are calling my name. Personification. I'm fit as a fiddle. A simile. I'm dying for your attention. Another hyperbole. Form is our next concept, and a less creative one. It adds a more structure to the poem, practically defining specific types of poems. From the intricate rhymes, rhythms, and repeated lines of a sonnet, or the open-ended form of a blank verse poem. Though it may not carry much weight on the imaginative side of poetry, it can give a stable place for those other chaotic concepts to grow in. Speaking of structure, let's move on to our basic building blocks of poem. Line and stanza will be the ones we focus on the session, and then following up with a stanza break. A line is just a group of words that end for a specific reason. That reason could be a very particular amount of syllables, like the meter I've read, or to make something rhyme. A group of these lines would be defined as a stanza, and the blank between stanzas would be called a stanza break. You see, amid all the smoke and mirrors of words and phrases, there is a sense of foundation within this art, and knowing these terms will help guide you through the creative fog, I should say. To be or not to be. It's a wonderful phrase. That is the famous question that many people undermine its importance, and poetry loves to play around this internal phrase, this gibberish we throw out to convey feelings. I guess it gives people purpose, a sense to be. To be a poet, to be a human, to be you. You must choose to be. For as long as you choose to be something, you won't hear the endless whispers of those who decided not to be anything, becoming nothing. Beyond the fact, poetry is a very interesting art, I should say. As old as time, it's interesting that poetry has lasted beyond language itself, and it's still used today. To be, or to not to be. Thank you all for attending today's session. I push for today's session to be shorter and more fearful. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments below. And leave a like as well. Hit that bell and subscribe now to be the first to receive these sessions as soon as they come out. This is Professor Void signing out, and remember to stay afraid and keep learning.